Welcome to Cleaves Tech and another video in our Fooocus for Stable Diffusion series of videos. In this video, I'll be giving some tips, and at the end of the video, I'm going to be showing you even how to create some images like this using image prompts. Don't miss any of my other videos covering all aspects of Fooocus, from installation to poses and face swap. For this video, I'm going to be taking a slightly different approach than what I've done with some of my other videos in the past. This is going to be less structured. It's more or less just a lot of small things that I've either didn't mention in the other videos, or I didn't have a full video to cover them, or just things that I've learned that I find interesting that I want to pass along. The first one that I want to cover here is actually one that I didn't realize that Fooocus had implemented and that I've used in other ones. The way prompting works is the things that usually at the beginning of the prompt are more important, have more weight than things at the back of the prompt. So anything that's really important, you usually want to put towards the beginning of the prompt. But the other thing that you can use is weights. And that basically tells Stable Diffusion that you want more emphasis put on that word or that phrase, and it can have different impacts on your results. Now, as I've mentioned before in my other videos, whenever I do some of the testing, another thing I will recommend when you start off trying new things, or a new LoRa, new model, new anything, go down and uncheck the random box down here and use the same seed when you're generating, so you can actually see the different results on what you're doing. I find that to be an extremely useful tool, is to be using that same seed over and over again. I'll usually use 4 different images. I'll change something, do more, and then I can see the impact it has on those compared to how they looked in the first generation I did. Now, another thing I do want to mention is I usually do speed up the generation. I've had people ask, my generation doesn't happen super fast. As you can see here, I've pretty much been leaving this going at the normal pace for this generation while I talk. I'm running an i5, it's a couple generations back. I have 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm running a 3070 with 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Did have a 3080 with 10 gigabytes I tried putting in there the other day, but that turned out to be a defective card, so I'm back to using the 3070 for now. So as we can see here, we have a woman with big eyes. If we want to emphasize those eyes, if we want bigger eyes, and this applies to certain things, you'll find that the results are different depending on what you add weight to. So in this example, I'm going to highlight actually big eyes. Now, I could put the parentheses, the colon, and everything after that to apply the weight. But the easier way is select the text that you want to add weight to, hold down the control key, and then use the up and down arrow to increase or lower that weight, which I always find 1.5. I find anything usually over 1.5, you start getting some weird results if you go too high. And then, of course, you can lower the weight as well. When we do that, and you want to go back and change that, if you highlight the whole thing and do control up and down, you'll notice it applies weight to the weight. I don't even know what the result of that would be. But, so if you want to edit this after you've unselected it, you want to select the original text, just that portion of it that you've added the weight to, and then we can do it again. And as you can see here, it now correctly adjust the weight on those. So that's a useful tip, is to, the control up and down arrow. It makes adding and lowering weight a lot easier. I was previously typing it all in. I get annoyed. This makes it much easier. It's a nice little feature that they've added. And now we're going to see the results of this. I've now unchecked random, so I'm using the same seed for this as I used for those images that I just generated. And I'm going to go ahead and generate those again. We'll see the difference between adding the weight on those. I'm going to actually speed this part of the video up. Okay, so we have our images done. Let's see the comparison here. Here on the left is the first one that was generated under just the standard big eyes. And then on the right is the same seed, but with more weight, the 1.5 weight added to the big eyes, which resulted in bigger eyes. Yeah, so similar one here. The one on the left was just with big eyes, and the one on the right is with the heavier weight on big eyes. So I think that gives you a pretty good example of the type of thing of what weight can do. Obviously, with this, I use this because it's something easier to see with big eyes. If you're using colors and things like that, it may not be quite as noticeable, but it does give more emphasis. So depending on what the word is, what the token is, will determine how it affects the image that is generated. That covers the weights on the prompts. It's a nice little tip. Control up arrow and down arrow. Control up arrow and down arrow. And that would work with any of these. We could do anything we want to increase or lower the weight. Okay, so the next thing I've had people ask me on the videos is how do they enable dark mode for focus? Because mine is not white, it's dark. That's actually nothing to do with focus. That's actually a browser setting. So for example, on mine, I have, I use the Brave browser. So in Brave, it's under Appearance, Brave Colors, and we can have my Windows, I have set to dark mode. So I have this set to be the same as whatever Windows is set at, but you can choose dark in there as well. If you use something like Chrome, it's the same idea. You can go in, search for mode. So down here in the settings, you'll find for Chrome the mode, and we can change that to dark. Or if you use device, that'll use whatever your system is set to. Okay, so that covers the dark mode. Now, the next thing I want to cover is a couple of different things, but they're all associated. So one thing is about searching styles. If you're looking for certain styles, since there's an awful lot of styles, you can actually, up at the top, there is a search function. So for example, if I want to look for any clay stuff, I can type in clay and it brings it right to the top. So that makes things a little bit easier when you're working with styles. Another thing I want to recommend when you're messing with new styles or new models or anything like that is, new LoRa's or new models or anything, is turn off all the styles, even the Fooocus V2 expansion, because it adds a lot to your prompts. And I'm going to show you what this has an effect on. So I think these are the default ones off the top of my head. And I'm going to use, actually, this is I came across this LoRa earlier today. It's a driftwood detailed art. So I went ahead and I've already downloaded the safe tensor file. I put it into the LoRa folder, which I cover in that tutorial on how to do that. So in Fooocus, I'm going to go over to my model tab. If I just downloaded it, I want to refresh all files. So that'll now show in my options. I'm going to choose the driftwood detailed art and that LoRa. I'm going to leave the weight just as 1 for now. And I'm going to go back to the styles. Now, I believe these were the standard ones that are on by default. I can't remember off the top of my head now. I've unchecked and rechecked them. A driftwood cat, for an example. And I'm going to show you what these come up with these styles already applied. And then I'm going to show you what it looks like without any styles applied. So you'll get an idea of why you want to potentially uncheck those to see what you get for results from things when you're experimenting. It's just like the seed and things like that. So let's go ahead and generate these. I'm actually just going to do 2 for now. Okay, so we have our 2 cats, driftwood cats, and as we can see here, they're not really, the cats themselves aren't driftwood. So I'd be wondering, well, this didn't come out right. I don't know what's going on. Why am I not getting the results that they're showing here? This makes no sense. Well, if we go into the style section and I go on here and I uncheck all of these, and then I go ahead, I'm going to leave the seed the same as I mentioned before. I'm not changing that. So we're going to regenerate with the exact same prompt, and we're going to see the difference that we get by unchecking those styles. And then I'll show you why that makes a big difference. So let's go ahead and generate those. Okay, so now we have our driftwood cats. Now these look a little bit different. We're getting a little bit better and closer to what we're looking for, I think, from this LoRa. Obviously, I only generated 2, so the results I get aren't going to necessarily show the true nature. I usually do a little bit more than that. But for this purpose of what I wanted to demonstrate, this will actually show exactly what I wanted. I'm going to pull up. This was the original one that we generated. And this was the other one from the same seed. Now, this one has much more driftwoody, where this one is more cat. And the same idea with this one. If we look at these two, this one on the right, which didn't have any of the styles applied, gets the more of the driftwood effect that we're looking for, whereas the one on the left doesn't get the effect of the driftwood because the styles have changed that. So you want to keep that in mind when you're messing around with this. Every LoRa, all these things interact differently. So especially if you're not getting the right results or the results you expect, that is when you want to start disabling styles, getting rid of the extra things in the prompt. If you have a really long prompt and you're not getting the results, try narrowing it down to just a couple words and expand from there to try to figure out what's actually causing you not to get the results that you want. So we can actually look in the log. Now, I will mention something else right here since we're discussing the log. I've had people ask about the images and if they retain, because for certain other ones, you can take an image, drop it and drag it into the interface, and it'll carry over all the settings and everything and regenerate that. You can't do that with Fooocus, and my understanding is they have no plans of doing that for privacy reasons. They don't want anything embedded in the images. So therefore, everything is in that log file. So we go in here. This is our log for these images. So the driftwood cat, as we can see in here, this is the prompt, and that's all there was. Nothing else. We had no styles applied or anything. Now, if we go down to the lower ones, you'll see you have the prompt, the driftwood cat, but then the Fooocus V2 expansion adds an awful lot, and you're also adding the styles. So when you add all these things, you're going to get different results than you might expect to get. So I recommend removing those, testing them, and then you can reapply styles depending on what the results that you want. Now, when it comes to the log files, this is another thing I'm going to show that I've had a few people ask about. Since you can't bring over the settings with other interfaces, you can drop and drag, things like that. And since you can't do that with Fooocus, how do you get those settings over? Do you have to reapply them or anything else? You do not. If you go into your log and scroll to an image, you'll actually find there's a copy to clipboard. If you click on that, it will copy all the information that you need to bring into Fooocus to get that same image. And I'm going to show you exactly how that's done, and also one thing to watch for when doing this, because there is something you do want to pay attention to when you do this, and that is when you go over to here, if you'll notice, we had specifically only one LoRa enabled here. Now, when you do this, it will enable the LoRa, any LoRas that were needed for that, but it won't disable the LoRas you already have enabled. So for this one here, we've just copied that. I'm gonna go in here and paste that. Now you'll see it gives us a whole bunch of information, and the generate button changes. It says load parameters. Now this one specifically, it only had the SDXL offset example LoRa enabled. And you'll notice over here, I still have the drift one enabled. So when I load the parameters, if I didn't have the SDXL offset enabled, I'll demonstrate that. Watch what happens. It should enable that one, but it won't disable the driftwood. So we'll go ahead with that, and we have that. Now the problem is, if I go ahead and generate this image, it's not going to generate the same image because I have that LoRa enabled, and that will have some impact on it. It may not have a major dramatic impact if I don't reference it, but it still does have an impact. When you do that, if you already have LoRa's enabled, you do want to make sure you disable the LoRa that didn't get disabled, because that's one thing, it doesn't disable them. Maybe they'll add that at some point in the future. I just noticed that myself, that it does that. And now if we go in here, it should generate the exact same image. When you do that as well, it'll set this number back to just 1. It automatically unchecks the random, and it puts the seed in there for it as well. If we go ahead and generate that, now we should get the exact same image that we got before. Let's check and see what happens. So we'll go into our log, and here's the original image, and there's the generated image. As we can see, it is the same image. Now, if we had left that LoRa enabled, it would have been almost the same, but when I was in testing, it will have an impact on it. So that is something to keep in mind when doing that. I've already mentioned this several times, and I like to stress it a lot. Whenever you're testing things, whenever you're trying out anything new, uncheck the random and use a set seed. That way you can keep regenerating images and see what the differences are. I've mentioned it before, I mention it again, because it's extremely useful to be doing that. Another thing I'll mention, even though I can't really demonstrate it because I'm not having an issue right now, is if you ever see that it doesn't seem like something is happening, or if you're not sure if something is frozen up or anything like that, I always mention to go in the command window. But one thing you can do is, I've noticed if I have any of those hiccups where something just kind of gets stuck and I want to see if that can be unstuck, is I'll come into my command window, click on it, and then just hit the enter key. And a lot of times, if it's stuck on something, that can kind of give it a kick and it will keep going. When it is useful is hard to say. It's something that I've noticed. I just want to pass that along. Okay, so my next tip is more or less, I get a lot of people asking about hands. They want a video on how do you fix hands? How do you make perfect hands? Well, sadly, there is no fix or perfect way of doing hands. I wish I had a video to do that. I do plan on a video that will cover hands and things like that in more detail, but I'm not quite ready yet because I haven't figured out the best methods 100%. But I do have ideas, some things that work, and then they don't seem to work. So it's still a lot of trial and error with the hands, but I'm going to show you a couple different ways I suggest dealing with them because I've had people ask about it. So I'm going to use this image to start with. As we can see here, the hand is messed up. The other hand actually looks fine. In painting is going to be your big friend when it comes to hands. It's all I can really say when it comes to hands. So let's go ahead with this one. I'm going to drop this one down here into the in painting. I'm going to keep it as the standard in painting. I'm actually just going to redraw this area here because trying to fix that one with any of the other methods can be hard, because if the hand is really messed up, then focus won't, it may improve the hand, but it still won't look right because it's wrong. I had one yesterday I was messing with. It did a perfect hand, but it was backwards. But it didn't realize that in reference to everything. So I couldn't solve that one easily besides just regenerating it. So let's go ahead and generate this and see what it does as far as fixing that hand. Okay, so we have our image in painting done. I have to turn this off when I'm recording the in painting because it has to upscale. If it does any upscaling on my system, I can't have other things running. So anyways, we have our 4 results, and looking at these, most of these did not come out that great. Like this one definitely didn't come out good, but that's the idea. And I would at this point say, okay, that might be the one that's acceptable because it works for what I'm looking for. So that's one. The basic solution is just to keep trying that one section over and over. And usually at some point, it'll solve whatever the problem is. I mean, one of the best things is, honestly, if you can avoid showing hands, that's really actually pretty useful. But that's not always an option. But if you can put one of the hands behind another object or something like that, a lot of times that makes it a lot easier than trying to actually make perfect hands. Now, for the next one, I'm going to look at one of these other images. Okay, so I'm going to use this one here. Now, obviously, it's further away, so I find that that's where you're going to even have more of an issue with the hands. Let's go work on that one. So we're going to bring this one in down here. I'll clear off what I had masked before, and then I'm going to bring that up. I am going to zoom in and just paint that area here. Now on this one, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm not going to do the standard painting. This is where I'm actually going to do the, go to the improved detail, and I'm going to add detailed hand in there. And we're going to go ahead. Now this is hit or miss as well. It depends on, a lot of times it'll try to take the structure of what the hand looks like and try to improve it from there. So if the hand is really, if it's already pretty bad, it may not actually fix it. You may just get a more detailed, messed up hand. But I have had much better luck with this method a lot of times than doing it with the other methods sometimes. So you really got to try different things to see what you get for results. Let's go ahead and see how this works. We're going to go ahead and generate. I need to actually turn off my recordings. I'll come back as soon as this is done. Okay, so we have our images generated, and I haven't really looked at them. This is our original hand here. And you can see here, we have a slightly better hand when it comes to that. Now, the one thing usually I try to do that I didn't do here, and but this actually will highlight that. I probably should have masked off more of the arm. Otherwise, you'll sometimes get that line where it blends. So that's something to keep in mind when you're masking. If you want to eliminate some of those blending lines, is to try to mask certain areas that will be more continuous. So if I had actually masked that whole section of the arm, it probably would have come out a little bit better. Now this did add the detail as well, but it did also help fix the hand as well. Like I said, not perfect. A lot of these will still be trial and error, but that's really all you can do for the most part with hands, is just keep trying. There's no magical recipe for them yet. And one last thing I just want to show that I was actually experimenting with is with the image prompts. And so let's go ahead, and I'm going to turn on the advanced features in the image prompts. I created some images with just text. So it's a white background, black text. That's it. Now, these images, I do find when you're doing this, it's going to be better when you're going with the correct aspect ratio. So I'm going to match this with that aspect ratio. So it's a 1344 by 768. All right, that's right down here. And then I'm going to set this one on to, well, let's go with the CBDS for this example. Now, that I'm going to use just for the structure. And then I'm going to take another image that I have here. And this one, I'm actually just going to use it as the image prompt to get more of the style from this image and bring it over. And I'm going to use a text prompt as well. Now, you can vary how these come out, and you can mix and match how this works. And then for the style, I'm actually going to undo all those. I'm going to use this clay style here, and I'll leave those as a default. Now we're going to go ahead, and I'm just going to generate those images. So as we can see in this image, it's taking the text from, the first one, and it's using the CPDS to bring in the structure. Now you can use the Pyrocani, depending on what you want to do. It works on either or. You'll get slightly different results on which one you use. And then down here, it's using that image to influence the look of that. And then it's using the Godzilla in the prompt to add Godzilla to it. And it's also using the craft clay style to influence how the image is created. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is that the text is not correct. What's going to happen is, depending on the stop at, that's going to determine when it stops using that as influence, and those letters may get mixed up. It may change what they show. So you may have to do several attempts. The other option is to increase the stop at. So it will influence the image further along, and it'll have less chances at because right now when it gets up to the 30th step, I'm doing it on quality. So when it gets to the 30th step, it stops using that as influence. And that'll definitely start changing some of the letters. So I'm gonna go ahead and just stop this to show you the difference if I change the stop at in here. So I'm gonna tell it I wanted to go pretty much somewhere about 75% of the way up before it starts changing it. Play with those settings to get different results that you want. This will keep the letters, the higher up the stop at is, the more likely your letters are going to stay formed. The downfall is you may not get as much of the influence of the other things on the generation that you want. So you're going to want to experiment with that. But definitely I find the aspect ratio wants to match the final picture if you want to get that exactly where you want it. I just started playing with this yesterday. Okay, so as we're seeing in these, the structure of the letters stayed more like they should, and that really comes down to where we change this stop at for the influence. So you do want to tweak that. You can also tweak the weight and everything else for the other ones as well, so do keep that in mind. So that gives you an idea of some of the things you can actually do with image prompting. You can get a lot of creative stuff based upon so many different things. We can influence it by changing it from craft clay to something else. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully you found the video interesting and you got some useful tips out of it. If you did, do consider hitting the like button. It definitely does help. Check out any of the other videos I have on Fooocus. I have quite a few. I'm going to have quite a few more, obviously. Any questions, just leave them in the comments. I do try to respond to as many as possible. And have a great day.